Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me, as always, is my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlet. How you doing this wonderful day, Joe?
I'm doing pretty good, Dr. Dave.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank all of our viewers and listeners for joining us for another episode. Today's topic is going to be what's really holding you back, where we're going to discuss things like identifying the hidden barriers that may be, challenging your growth. So, with that, Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on this topic? What's holding you back?
For most of us, it could be a variety of things. It could be one thing, it could be multiple things, it can be a combination of things. But I think one of the things that is probably common misconception is the fact that, is related to our age, our skills, and possibly the opportunities that are available to us. So we rely heavily on those things that we can identify as the things that might be holding us back. But the reality is it comes down to sometimes our beliefs, our habits, or our fears. And I'd say the fears is probably the one big thing that holds us back, mainly because we're afraid of, the fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't gone down that road before. We haven't seen enough evidence to help us get out of that fear of what could be on the other side of that. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that holds us back, that keeps us stuck where we are today, because we just don't know what's going to happen, or we may have seen examples of what might have happened with other people, even though the
Right.
circumstances might be totally different. We might still relate that to that could happen to me. So I think that's one of the probably the biggest contributors of us being stuck.
Joe, you bring that's a great start into this conversation, and it made me think back of a couple of things. If it isn't broke, don't fix it sort of
Right.
mentality that
Right.
organizations have. Well, we already tried that, 5 years ago. It's not going to work. It's like, well, that was 5 years ago. That was a year ago. Maybe you have a different
Right.
perspective now, or more information that'll or more tools like technology is compounding, at an exponential rate now, more so than it was a decade ago. So,
Right.
that could be one of the things that's considered your personnel, maybe them having more experience and insight on how to use these tools, and maybe a slightly different approach or nuance to doing that. And it also reminds me of, and I know I've told this story before, probably in the first or second season, but when I was in college, I saved my college math as my last two classes to get my bachelor's degree. And I was so afraid of taking college math because I did not do well in high school.
Right.
I mean, math is yes, algebra no, geometry yes, trig and all that stuff definitely no. That's oh hell no sort of thing. And
Right.
so I procrastinated those last two courses, and I was so afraid. I actually went out and bought the college textbook first, ran it through cover to cover in about 3 months, and tried to test out of it. And I missed it
Right.
by 2 points. And I remember walking away so defeated. Like, man, I just spent 3 months studying for this. What? I missed it by 2 points. And one of my colleagues was like, Dave, it's okay, man. You just taught yourself college math.
Right. Right.
And I did. I did really well in the classes. I think an A or B in both classes, which is pretty cool. So that fear can be turned around into something positive. And in that case, I was so afraid I went against going into the next classes to actually change a habit and try to test out of it, which actually changed my perspective to actually take the class and be successful.
Right. But I think part of the challenge is that, once you get hung up on that thing that makes you scared, or, that you're the fear is driven by, it's hard to really think beyond that. So
Yeah.
so you're really just stuck in that, well, this is what happened in the past. So not relinquishing, the fact that, or the thought that I could do it better, or I may have improved. I think that being stuck keeps us in that place where we don't give ourselves that opportunity or that chance to try to see if we can overcome it.
Yeah,
And
and
so
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say this leads into those barriers, like, my past experiences kind of shaping those current decisions,
Right, right.
or
Yep.
waiting for that perfect timing to take the class, air
Right,
quotes, and just that overall comfort of an avoidance of not having to do it.
right.
So, those things all contributed to my decisions for that particular uh, two classes, and it's also contributed to several decisions within organizations that I've been in where they're waiting for that perfect moment, or they're relying too heavily upon those past experiences to shape what's going forward for them.
Right. And so you get into, and I know we talked about this before, we get into that paralysis of not doing anything because we're so hung up on or not willing to chance it that we don't do anything. And
Right.
um, so what that maybe leads to is the whole avoidance of actually doing something. And so we pretend like we're working or we're doing the same thing over and over again because we think we're saying we're productive when in reality we're not. We're really just uh jumping past that chance of moving forward and continuing to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, that may also be part of that fear of, losing your identity or status as an
Right. Yeah.
expert, or,
Yep.
or as an up and comer, or as just someone who knows their job really, really well, or is comfortable with where they're at. And they don't want to lose that identity of, oh, well, Dave was good at this, but now
Right.
this has happened and now he sucks at it.
Right. It's that whole idea of starting over again
Yeah.
because you've established yourself at this point in your career or your life. And now you're having to take a step back because you may not be as fluent in a certain topic or certain things that you once were in another area, where you were the expert. So I think that again um, tends you to not want to change, not to potentially move away from where you are because you feel comfortable, you feel confident. Because again, when you go to something that you don't know or haven't done in the past, then you're vulnerable again. You're like that kid that doesn't know anything yet. So you're having
Mhm.
to start over. You're having to rely on other people where in the past you may not have to because you became you became an expert in a certain area or topic. And so you didn't have to rely on those outside resources or additional help from other people. So again, it puts you in that spot of I'm not confident, so I don't want to go back there again.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it a few minutes ago, the, staying busy or the avoidance piece. And how many times have we seen people being busy at work, busy to be busy instead of busy to be
Right. Not
productive,
really doing
and
anything.
they brag about how busy they are. They don't have time for anything, but they're not producing anything,
Right.
you know.
Yep.
And I know that was one of my challenges as a manager and leader was helping those individuals overcome that type of busyness, making them
Right.
realize that, yeah, that's helping a little bit, but really what you need to focus on is this for the team.
Well, but I think that's a natural thing, though, that most of us, if we say we're busy, if we pretend like we're busy, then we're doing something, but it may not turn into productivity. We just may be busy as a way to ease ourselves or to validate what we're doing, which in reality it may not contribute to the team or
Mhm.
contribute to moving forward. So yeah, again, uh, it may not be productive. You may be doing something, but it may not lead to anything. It may not be anything of
Right.
substance.
So I think that's, and you and I have talked about this offline just prior to this, and we talked about that awareness. We've talked about awareness and self-awareness so much, and it is a common theme. And this is another example where that awareness comes into play to create that kind of first breakthrough, if you will.
Right.
And with that, how do you view that? How do you anticipate that? How, where does your uh, growth start at that point. And it really is when you're honest with yourself about what's holding you back. We've identified some barriers and some, avoidance to productivity that could be those barriers. And that may or may not resonate with some of our viewers and listeners, but I know it's resonated with me in the past that, there are those barriers that you actually have to confront. And it's not a pleasant thing sometimes. You have to admit to yourself that, hey, you know, I don't want to change that right now, but maybe
Right.
you have to because that is what's holding you back at this point.
Well, I think, like you said, we've said this many times throughout many episodes, just the idea of that self reflection. And that critical self reflection means that you're open and honest with yourself. You're willing to look in the mirror and point out those flaws sometimes, because that's the only way we're going to move forward. Because if we keep pretending like they don't exist or they're not there, then we're definitely not going to be able to move forward because again we're harboring those feelings of the way we were. We're not really wanting to accept, okay, maybe I do need some assistance. So we're going to have a very difficult time moving forward if we don't really think about this might be my thing that's holding me back. This might be the thing that has caused me to pause. And if we don't do that or are not honest with ourselves, then I think we'll struggle with moving forward, regardless of what we're trying to do. If we're not honest with ourselves, if we're not, again, really willing to do the work, and identifying, yeah, this could potentially be my problem. This could potentially be what is holding me back. What is keeping me present and not thinking about the future where I could go.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to iterate that, putting a name to it. Through that critical self-reflection, you know, it's uncomfortable, but you have to put it on there. I'm
Right.
procrastinating. I'm
Yep.
delaying this because I don't feel comfortable or I don't want to change. It's working
Right.
just fine.
Yep.
And actually, it sounds silly, but we've talked about this before, writing it down because that solidifies that thought
Yep.
and it forces you to reflect upon it. And then once you've identified it, then that's half the solution to the problem is identifying it
Right.
because
Yep.
now you can start looking at potential solutions or tools or techniques to go forward with that momentum you've created.
Right. And I'll go back to, you talked about procrastination, and I know I've shared this story. It's probably been a while since I shared it, but when I reconnected with a friend that I'd known for a lot of years, and we had a conversation, and he was into making videos, YouTube 1 minute videos, things like that. And he kept telling me, hey, you need to make a video, you need to make a video. And so we reconnected again about a year later, and he said, I haven't seen a video yet. And I was like, you're right. And so my first video that I actually created, the first one I ever did, put on YouTube, Facebook, all those platforms, and it was procrastination. It was label, like you said, labeling that thing that was holding me back, and that was literally what it was. It was procrastinating because, and it's really related to this topic, the fear of how are people going to respond? What are they going to say when they see me? Those types of things that was holding me back. So that's a perfect example of me for a long time just not accepting it. And when I finally accepted, I made probably a 3 or 4 minute video about procrastination.
Right.
So I labeled it, I owned it, and it's funny because now if I, add that video plus all the other videos I did after that, I mean, I've now, I've done probably close to 300 videos, which I would have never imagined that one video would have turned into, all these videos, the podcast and us being,
Mhm.
on camera all this many times now. And it just, again, it started with me identifying what my fear was. And,
Yeah.
and so, and to be able to get to this point. So yeah, I just wanted to share that as an
And I'll even
example.
touch on our example that we've touched on before about starting the podcast, how we,
Right. Yeah.
it wasn't so much the procrastination, but it was the over planning and
Right.
the
Yeah.
busy being
Yeah.
busy doing
Yep.
6 months of research trying to make the
Yep.
perfect podcast. And that's just another example of that. And when we finally decided, hey, what are we doing here? We need to commit to this. And we did. We identified it, we've overanalyzed, that was one of the barriers. So we just drew that line, and now we're 200 plus videos.
Right.
So, let's think about this for a few minutes. Uh, I think we'd like to ask our listeners to think about, what am I protecting by staying where I am now? What is holding you back from moving forward, from taking that next step, from identifying what's really holding you back?
Right. No, I think you said it earlier about writing it down because it does add validity to it. The idea that okay, now I see it every, especially if you put it in a place where you see it all the time or other people see it and
Oh,
ask
yeah,
you
that's a
about
good
it.
one.
That's and again, I'll go back to when I was going through my education journey, and that's exactly what I did. I shared my intentions with a lot of different people, and so anytime.
That can be a very scary thing, Joe.
Absolutely, because now they're every time they see you, they're going to
Yep.
question you about it. They're
They're
going
going to
to
hold you accountable, but it's
exactly.
also a good thing as
Yep.
well.
And that's what happened with me because every time I would see that person or those people, they'd be like, "Hey, where are you at? So are you done yet?" And it really again a constant reminder of where I was trying to go. And so I don't know how this all would have played out if I wouldn't have did that intentionally by
Mhm.
sharing, that with me or with my peers, my family, my colleagues. I think it was a motivator for me to. I think it became a. I don't want to let not just myself down, but all those people that are counting on me, that are believing in me that I can do this. So
Mhm.
it was helpful to write it down, identify it, call it out, and put it out there so that people could help me along the way, and I will honestly say I believe it did help me get to where I am today as far as
Oh,
my education journey. Yeah.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. So that's our challenge for our viewers and listeners this week, is to, write down at least one to three honest barriers this week, on what's really holding you back. Sit down and, take some time out for yourself, 5, 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes or an hour, while you're doing your exercises, or, walking back and forth to the car or whatever. Think about what those things are and write at least one to three of them down. And we're not asking you to solve it this week. We're just asking you to, or encouraging you, challenging you to
Right.
write those barriers down, and identify them. So, we've got about, probably about 3 minutes left, Joe. 2 to 3 minutes left. What are your final thoughts on what's really holding you back?
Well, again, I think we started out with, a lot of us have different reasons why we don't move forward. But I'd say in my case, a lot of it has been fear, just fear of the unknown, fear of failure. You haven't seen it before, so you don't know how it's going to come out. So a lot of it is fear. I mean, there's still other things that contribute to that, but for me, that was the biggest thing. But it still comes down to what you believe in, the habits that you've acquired over the years. Like we talked about, somebody was a subject matter expert. So they've been doing the same thing over and over again. They can now do it with their eyes closed in their sleep. But now we're asking them to step outside of that comfort zone that they've created for themselves and to maybe challenge themselves to do something different. And so again, that is, it is challenging for a lot of people. For most of us, have that same experience. So just really think about being honest with yourself, like we've talked about before in the past. Just you identify those things that you see in the mirror, or people are telling you that maybe if everybody's telling you the same thing, then maybe it's true, especially about you. You don't want to see it, but there's enough evidence in place that maybe you should pay attention to that. So again, we all go through it, experience it, but I think the other piece of this is to take it one step at a time. Like Dave said, you don't have to, you may have 10 barriers that are in front of you, knock them down, bit by bit. Don't try and knock the whole wall down, but take one brick at a time. So, concentrate on one thing that you maybe can change today. If you finish that one, cross it off the list, move to the next one.
I think that's a great way to wrap up the show. So with that, We'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us on another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, your personal, professional, and career development podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard today or got something out of it, a nugget or two, give us a like, give us a share, subscribe, and with that, until next time, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.